Just being able to layer different ideas and different textures, different types of imagery together to extract some pieces, to replace it with something else, or sometimes just leave that extracted space completely empty is such a beautiful feeling. And I think when I finish the work, I often have that feeling of being able to exhale. I love the idea of not having an end in sight. I think there's so much that can be constrained and so much that you can plan and prepare for. I love the fact that I don't plan or prepare in many cases these works. Generally the work is just created while I'm in flow and I love that. I love being in rural settings. Yes, sometimes I'm the only black person in that space, but I feel at peace in those areas. I feel like so often we're kind of excluded from those environments where we shouldn't be. And when I'm creating, I like to create these magical spaces where there is that freedom to be in a rural landscape and to feel free and whole, really. Through seeing ourselves, I've really wanted to almost reclaim those spaces, so reclaim the rural environment, because we are doing things, we are in those spaces, but so often we're not highlighted in those spaces. My work is a celebration of blackness. I feel as though so often we're not celebrated, we're not presented in a positive light. We're so nuanced, there isn't a single black narrative. There are so many different stories we have to tell. But if you look at mainstream media, quite often our remit is so small. We're not given that space to be who we are and to have multiple voices. I intend through this work to really readdress the balance. And so each piece features a black woman. Seeing Ourselves takes its name from the title of the book of the same name by Francis Borzello. What I was struck by, ourselves does not include women of colour, black women. If you look, seeing ourselves is not, it's not all of us, is it? I don't see myself. I love how fragile she is. Because I don't see fragility as a weakness, I see fragility as a strength. I see vulnerability as a strength. Whereas I think growing up, fragility or showing any signs of weakness or
needing help.
Yeah, or not being complete, almost like you needed finishing, as though you needed to be more. It is a strength. If I wasn't vulnerable and if I wasn't fragile, I wouldn't be able to make the work, I wouldn't be able to share the work, I wouldn't be able to create. Because you make yourself vulnerable by making the work and celebrate that vulnerability. I started making this work at a time when I was working part-time for a museum. But this work is really a response to not only not seeing myself represented back in magazines or in gallery spaces or in museums. It's also about, the staffing in those spaces. It's also about the images that we see presented for us. They are not very diverse quite often. There's so much work to be done, but I'm trying so hard to work in a number of different mediums in order to ensure, or to at least make those steps happen. I really want to instigate that kind of change through my work. I'm so happy that I'm showing in the Arena Gallery, not only because it's within the MAC and it's a thriving art space, but also because it's so many people will be able to access my work. My work is a lot to do with accessibility. It doesn't have the boundaries of a traditional white cube space. Yeah, I'm just really pleased I'm showing in that space. You don't very often see maybe a black woman sitting on her sofa with an A4 cutting mat cutting up bits of paper and creating art while the children are in bed and while she's sitting next to her husband. And that's what I did. I would love people to see that it doesn't have to be the way it's always been. There have been so many successful black artists and artists of colour, and so often when their stories aren't told, and it's more than frustrating because if we don't see ourselves represented back, for many it really acts as a barrier of not succeeding. But I'm hoping that my show will show people that quite possibly it's something that they could not necessarily make a career out of, but something they might want to engage in, looking back at things that maybe they loved as a child and not just shutting those things away and thinking that I'm an adult now, I can't do this. I'm doing this now with a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old. And for me that feels really, really special, particularly because I guess I never expected this to happen at this stage of my life.